Hello, sixth graders. This lesson is for you today. If you are in cohort B, it is Monday, September 28th. So, this is what you are completing if you are in cohort B on Monday. If you are in cohort A and C, it is now Thursday, October 1st, and this is your assignment and what you are completing if you are in cohort A and C on Thursday, October 1st. Okay, your homework for today is to check Power School for missing work and complete it. And what you need opened in Google Classroom is the Elevator Formative Assessment. So you want to open the Elevator Formative Assessment. So pause this video right now and go ahead and open that elevator formative assessment. Okay, so let's review. Let's think about all of the work we've done in ELA since school started. So as you listen to me, think about all the work we've done to relaunch our reading lives and become great readers. So the first few weeks of school here in ELA, we've been working really hard at building and rebuilding our reading lives during this crazy pandemic we are in. Think about everything we've done. We've spent the last few weeks really getting to know ourselves as readers. We explored how readers read for many different purposes, and these purposes can be different for everyone. We discovered that our textual lineage revealed certain books and authors that really affected us over the years. And then we reflected on how that information can help us with our reading choices going forward. We explored our identities and then discovered that the identities we bring to our texts create mirror moments and window moments for us. Sometimes our identities really influence our understanding, and sometimes our identities really limit our understanding, right? So books can be a mirror. But either way, we know we are good readers and we can find a way to connect with the text. So sometimes, like in a mirror text or moment, we feel like we are a character in the book. We feel like we live in that place, or we feel like they have shared many of the same experiences that we have. We see our own lives and experiences connected to the story and the characters. Sometimes, like in a window text or moment, we feel like some things are new and different from our lives. So we might need to walk a mile in the character's shoes to really understand the story. Since we are not like the characters, or we don't live in places like in the story, or we haven't experienced many of the events in the story, we're going to have to learn from the characters in the story, right? So, windows offer a view of the world outside of ourselves. So, today is going to be a formative assessment day. We are going to take a practice assessment to show our understanding of how we are connecting and interacting with stories using mirror and window moments in order to make the most of our reading. So, you're going to listen to me read aloud the text. And as I'm reading aloud, I want you to focus on the characters, the setting, the problems, the big events, and the solution. I want you to stay alert to when you are able to connect to the story. When does something feel familiar to you? When do you feel like you can see your own life in the story reflecting back at you? That's your mirror. When does something feel new or different to you? When do you feel like you need to learn from the character and the story in order to better understand? That would be your window moment, right? So, what mirror moment did you find in the text? How was your understanding strengthened? What window moment did you find in the text? What were you able to see into by looking through another's experience? Okay, so please open the practice assessment in your Google Classroom if you haven't already. The text is given to you within this practice assessment, so follow along with the text as I read aloud. If you find that this helps you to stay focused and engaged, otherwise, you can just listen to my voice reading, remembering to stay focused on what you are hearing. Okay, so this story is called The Elevator by William Slater. It was an old building with an old elevator, a very small elevator with a maximum capacity of 3 people. Martin, a thin 12-year-old, felt nervous in it from the first day he and his father moved into the apartment. Of course, he was always uncomfortable in elevators, afraid that they would fall, but there was something especially unpleasant about this one. Perhaps its baleful atmosphere was due to the light from the single fluorescent ceiling strip, bleak and dim on the dirty brown walls. Perhaps the problem was the door, which never stayed open quite long enough and slammed shut with such ominous clanging finality. Perhaps it was the way the mechanism shuddered in a kind of exhaustion each time it left a floor, as though it might never reach the next one. Maybe it was simply the dimensions of the contraption that bothered him, so small that it felt uncomfortably crowded, even when there was only one other person in it. Coming home from school the day after they moved in, Martin tried the stairs, but they were almost as bad. Windowless, shadowy, with several dark landings where the light bulbs had burned out. His footsteps echoed behind him like slaps on the cement, as though there was another person climbing, getting closer. By the time he reached the 17th floor, which seemed to take forever, he was winded and gasping. His father, who worked at home, wanted to know why he was so out of breath. "But why didn't you take the elevator?" he asked, frowning at Martin when he explained about the stairs. "Not only are you skinny and weak and bad at sports," his expression seemed to say, "but you're also a coward." After that, Martin forced himself to take the elevator. He would have to get used to it, he told himself, just the way he got used to being bullied at school and always picked last when they chose teams. The elevator was an undeniable fact of life. He didn't get used to it. He remained tense in the trembling little box, his eyes fixed on the numbers over the door that blinked on and off so haltingly, as if at any moment they might simply give up. Sometimes he forced himself to look away from them to the emergency stop button or the red alarm button. What would happen if he pushed one of them? Would a bell ring? Would the elevator stop between floors? And if it did, how would they get him out? That was what he hated about being alone on the thing, the fear of being trapped there for hours by himself. But it wasn't much better when there were other passengers. He felt too close to any other rider, too intimate. And he was always very conscious of the effort people made not to look at one another, staring fixedly at nothing. Being short in this one situation was an advantage, since his face was below the eye level of adults. And after a brief glance, they ignored him until the morning the elevator stopped at the 14th floor and the fat lady got on. She wore a threadbare green coat that ballooned around her. Her ankles bulged above dirty sneakers. As she waddled into the elevator, Martin was sure he felt it sink under her weight. She was so big that she filled the cubicle. Her coat brushed against him, and he had to squeeze into the corner to make room for her. There certainly wouldn't have been room for another passenger. The door slammed quickly behind her, and then, unlike everyone else, she did not stand facing the door. She stood with her back to the door, wheezing, staring directly at Martin. For a moment, he met her gaze. Her features seemed very small, squashed together by the loose, fleshy mounds of her cheeks. She had no chin, only a great swollen mass of neck, barely contained by the collar of her coat. Her sparse red hair was pinned back by a plastic barrette, and her blue eyes, though tiny, were sharp and penetrating, boring into Martin's face. Abruptly, he looked away from her to the numbers over the door. She didn't turn around. Was she still looking at him? His eyes slipped back to hers, then quickly away. She was still watching him. He wanted to close his eyes. He wanted to turn around and stare into the corner, but how could he? The elevator creaked down to 12, down to 11. Martin looked at his watch. He looked at the numbers again. They weren't even down to 9 yet. And then, against his will, his eyes slipped back to her face. She was still watching him. Her nose tilted up. There was a large space between her nostrils and her upper lip, giving her a piggish look. He looked away again, clenching his teeth, fighting the impulse to squeeze his eyes shut against her. She had to be crazy. Why else would she stare at him this way? What was she going to do next? She did nothing. She only watched him, breathing audibly, until the elevator reached the first floor at last. Martin would have rushed past her to get out, but there was no room. He could only wait as she turned, reluctantly, it seemed to him, and moved so slowly out into the lobby. And then he ran. He didn't care what she thought. He ran past her, outside into the fresh air, and he ran almost all the way to school. He had never felt such relief in his life. He thought about her all day. Did she live in the building? He had never seen her before, and the building wasn't very big, only 4 apartments on each floor. It seemed likely that she didn't live there and had only been visiting somebody. But if she were only visiting, why was she leaving the building at 7:30 in the morning? People didn't make visits at that time of day. Did that mean she did live in the building? If so, it was a certainty that sometime he would be riding with her on the elevator again. He was apprehensive as he approached the building after school. In the lobby, he considered the stairs, but that was ridiculous. Why should he be afraid of an old lady? If he was afraid of her, if he let it control him, then he was worse than all the names they called him at school. He pressed the button. He stepped into the empty elevator. He stared at the lights, urging the elevator on. It stopped on 3. At least it's not 14, he told himself. The person she was visiting lives on 14. He watched the door slide open, revealing a green coat, a piggish face, blue eyes already fixed on him as though she knew he'd be there. It wasn't possible. It was like a nightmare. But there she was, massively real. Going up, he said, his voice a humiliating squeak. She nodded, her flesh quivering, and stepped on. The door slammed. He watched her pudgy hand move toward the buttons. She pressed, not 14, but 18. The top floor, the floor above his own. The elevator trembled and began its ascent. The fat lady watched him. He knew she had gotten on at 14 this morning. So why was she on 3, going up to 18 now? The only floors he ever went to were 17 and 1. What was she doing? Had she been waiting for him? Was she riding with him on purpose? But that was crazy. Maybe she had a lot of friends in the building, or else she was a cleaning lady who worked in different apartments. That had to be it. He felt her eyes on him as he stared at the number, slowly blinking on and off, slower than usual, it seemed to him. Maybe the elevator was having trouble because of how heavy she was. It was supposed to carry 3 adults, but it was old. What if it got stuck between floors? What if it fell? They were on 5 now. It occurred to him to press 7, get off there, and walk the rest of the way. And he would have done it if he could have reached to the buttons, but there was no room to get past her without squeezing against her, and he could not bear the thought of any physical contact with her. He concentrated on being in his room. He would be home soon, only another minute or so. He could stand anything for a minute, even this crazy lady watching him. Unless the elevator got stuck between floors. Then what would he do? He tried to push the thought away, but it kept coming back. He looked at her. She was still staring at him, no expression at all on her squashed little features. When the elevator stopped on his floor, she barely moved out of the way. He had to inch past her, rubbing against her horrible, scratchy coat, terrified the door would close before he made it through. She quickly turned and watched him as the door slammed shut, and he thought, now she knows I live on 17. Did you ever notice a strange fat lady on the elevator? He asked his father that evening. Can't say as I have, he said, not looking away from the television. He knew he was probably making a mistake, but he had to tell somebody. Well, she was on the elevator with me twice today, and the funny thing was, she just kept staring at me. She never stopped looking at me for a minute. You know of anybody who has a weird cleaning lady or anything? What are you so worked up about now? His father said, turning impatiently away from the television. I'm not worked up. It was just funny the way she kept staring at me. You know how people never look at each other in the elevator? Well, she just kept looking at me. What am I going to do with you, Martin? His father said. He sighed and shook his head. Honestly, now you're afraid of some poor old lady? I'm not afraid. You're afraid, his father said with total assurance. When are you going to grow up and act like a man? Are you going to be timid all your life? He managed not to cry until he got to his room, but his father probably knew he was crying anyway. He slept very little. And in the morning, when the elevator door opened, the fat lady was waiting for him. She was expecting him. She knew he lived on 17. He stood there, unable to move, and then backed away. And as he did so, her expression changed. She smiled as the door slammed. He ran for the stairs. Luckily, the unlit flight on which he fell was between 16 and 15. He only had to drag himself up 1.5 flights with a terrible pain in his leg. His father was silent on the way to the hospital, disappointed and annoyed at him for being such a coward and a fool. It was a simple fracture. He didn't need a wheelchair, only a cast and crutches, but he was condemned to the elevator now. Was that why the fat lady had smiled? Had she known it would happen this way? At least his father was with him on the elevator on the way back from the hospital. There was no room for the fat lady to get on. And even if she did, his father would see her. He would realize how peculiar she was, and then maybe he would understand. And once they got home, he could stay in the apartment for a few days. The doctor had said he should use the leg as little as possible. A week, maybe a whole week without going on the elevator, riding up with his father, leaning on his crutches. He looked around the little cubicle and felt a kind of triumph. He had beaten the elevator and the fat lady for the time being, and the end of the week was very far away. Oh, I almost forgot. His father reached out his hand and pressed 9. What are you doing? You're not getting off, are you? He asked him, trying not to sound panicky. Let me go with you. I want to visit her too, Martin pleaded, struggling forward on his crutches. But the door was already closing. Afraid to be on the elevator alone, his father said with a look of total scorn. Grow up, Martin. The door slammed shut. Martin hobbled to the button and pressed 9, but it didn't do any good. The elevator stopped at 10, where the fat lady was waiting for him. She moved in quickly. He was too slow, too unsteady on his crutches to work his way past her in time. The door sealed them in. The elevator started up. Hello, Martin, she said and laughed and pushed the stop button. Okay, so now that the story has come to an end, think about it for a minute. You're going to show your thinking. Okay. So just kind of ruminate on the story for a minute. It was a good story. I hope you liked it. I think it was a really good story. So I want you to look at task 1. Okay. So I have task 1 here. And this is what it looks like, and you're going to end up going back to the Google document that has it on it as well, and so that you can look at it too. So let's look at task 1 together, and I want you to think about a mirror moment for you in this text. Think about what was familiar to you because it was similar to your own self and identity, and how that influenced your understanding of the text. Then you're going to complete the tasks that follow. You're going to review the example that I'm giving you from the short story, The Save, to help you. So let's first look at the example from The Save and watch and listen to me first before you go off and do yours. Okay. So this is what yours looks like here, right? So I have my example from The Save. It says, describe a mirror moment. So I put, remember how we talked about first that it's all about the story. The first section is going to be about the story, right? So I said a mirror moment that I had was when Oren tripped over his own feet and belly flopped in front of the goal while trying to make the save. Oren thinks that he did not make the save and feels that he is a bum. So, in this section, remember when you describe the moment, remember that you are focusing on the story. You only talk about the event, the character, and or the setting of the story. So remember, this section is all about the story. Tell about an event in the story. So I actually want you to go and do just this section now. Okay, so pause the video here, go to your Google Doc, and do just this section for the mirror moment, only A, where you're describing the event from the story that you are connecting to. So, what happened in the elevator? Okay, so pause right now and go do that. What is the part in the elevator that is a mirror for you? Pause, and then when you're ready, come back and hit play again. Okay, so you're back. So now watch and listen to me as we do part B here, okay? Why was this a mirror moment for you? What did you understand better because of your mirror moment? So there are two parts to this. First, for the first sentence starter, you focus on you. You think about your identities and how you were able to understand this, right? So I said, this was a mirror moment for me because I also have made a fool of myself and felt embarrassed in front of a crowd of people, right? So, what similar thing happened for you? So, this is the second part of it, okay? So, try that now, all about you. So, go do that part now. This was a mirror moment for me because now tell about your experience. So, pause the video and go tell about your experience, how it relates to what happened in the elevator. What is that mirror to you? And then hit play when you're ready. All right, so now the third part, watch and listen to me again, and we'll do the last part of this. So, the second part of this B section, the second sentence starter, is where you explain what you were able to understand better because you have had a similar experience or felt that this text was familiar to you. So it says, because of this shared experience, I understand, and I put for the save, because of this shared experience, I understand the embarrassment that Oren is feeling and how he probably just wishes he could vanish. So, this third part is what you understood. This is your explanation of your connection to the story. So now you try. So go back to your Google Doc and try this third part. So, because of the shared experience, I understand. Remember, explain what you understood in the story. So, pause the video. And then when you are ready, come back to the video and we'll do the second part. We'll do the second question together again. Okay, so this is question two. So, this one we want to think about a window moment for you in the text. So, think about what was unfamiliar to you because it was new or different to your own self and identity, and how that limited your understanding of the text. Then you're going to complete the following tasks. We're going to go through it together, just like we did for the mirror moment. So, let's review the example from the save first to help you. So let's look at the first example from the save. You watch and listen to me first. So, A, describe the window moment. So I have a window moment that I had was when Oren was describing how small his town was and how news of his game traveled to his grandfather so fast. So remember, when you describe the moment, remember that you are focusing on the story. So this section here is focusing on the story. Only talk about the character, the event, and or the setting of the story. So now you're going to try it. What is a window moment for you? Only talk about the story in part A. So pause the video and you go try it for the elevator. Only talking about what happened in the story. Hit play when you're ready to move on to part B. All right, good. So now we're ready for part B. Now this is the part is why is this a window moment for you? What did this window moment allow you to see into? So we want to think about here is my example from the save. And here is the sentence starter. This was a window moment for me because, and remember, this part, the first part of part B, is all about you, what your experience is. So this was a window moment for me, right? For me, because I don't live in such a small town and news would never travel this fast. So in this section, I want you to remember it's all about you, tell about you and your experience. So go back to your Google Doc and do just this first part of part B, telling about you and your experience and why it's a window moment for you. And then hit pause and then hit play when you're ready to do the last part. Remember to focus on you and your experience. All right, cool. Now we're ready for the last section. Remember, the last section, you're going to be explaining what you learned from the story. So, the second part, the sentence starter, is where you explain what you had a harder time understanding because you have not experienced this. What did you learn from the story? So, my example from the save is because of this new experience, I am able to see into Oren's life and how hard it must be for him to have no privacy from what happens every day. This must be very difficult for him as a teenager. So, here, this last section, remember, this is what you understood. This is your explanation of your connections to the story. Explain what you learned from the story. So pause the video again, go back and finish this last section, then come back to the video for just a final few thoughts. Okay, awesome. Nice job. All right. So, remember, you guys did great here. I'm going to take a look at these. I'm going to give you some feedback because we're going to be having a summative assessment soon. So, we'll look at this practice assessment. I'm going to give you feedback on where you are doing really well with using your identity and experiences to help you understand text and where you need to improve. The feedback is going to help you before we take our real assessment, which is coming up soon. Make sure, please, that you go back to the Google Doc and you turn it in Google Classroom. Please turn that formative assessment in Google Classroom, and then please enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you tomorrow.